okay, now this has got to stop. Okay, don't break my little heart. Don't.
Pam Grier was called many things throughout her career. Fearless, groundbreaking, unstoppable. But those labels only scratched the surface of who she truly was. To audiences, she was the queen of action films, a woman who dominated the screen with strength and confidence at a time when few women, especially black women, were allowed to do so. What the world didn't see were the private battles she carried quietly behind the camera. Her story is not just about fame or film history, but about survival, resilience, and reclaiming power in a system that repeatedly tried to take it away. Long before Hollywood celebrated her toughness, Pam had already learned how to endure. Her life unfolded across shifting cities, cultural contradictions, and personal challenges that shaped her long before she ever stepped onto a movie set. The woman audiences admired wasn't manufactured by cinema. She was forged by experience. Pam Grier didn't become strong because she played strong characters. She played them because strength had already become part of her identity. A childhood without roots. Pamela Suzette Grier was born on May 26, 1949 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, into a working family shaped by service and movement. Her mother, Gwendolyn, worked as a nurse while her father, Clarence, served in the U.S. Air Force. Because of his military career, the family relocated often, and Pam grew up without a single place she could call home. That constant movement created adaptability, but it also planted a quiet sense of disconnection. When she was still very young, the family moved overseas to England, where Pam encountered a different cultural atmosphere. She later reflected on how race was perceived differently there, how she felt less singled out than she would later in the United States. Those early observations stayed with her, shaping how she understood identity and belonging. When the family eventually returned to America and settled in Colorado, Pam felt the contrast immediately. The sense of freedom she had briefly known was replaced by barriers she was too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel deeply. Learning the world was not gentle. When Pam returned to the United States as a child, she quickly realized that the world she was entering operated by unspoken rules she hadn't been taught yet. Simple moments, riding a bus, entering a store, standing in a school hallway, became quiet lessons in belonging and exclusion. There were places where she felt welcomed, and others where she sensed, without words, that she did not quite fit. Being of mixed heritage made her visible in ways that were not always kind. And instead of curiosity, she often encountered distance or discomfort. At school, difference became a reason for isolation rather than understanding, and she learned early how easily people could be judged for what set them apart. These experiences left emotional impressions that lingered, shaping how she moved through the world. Pam began to understand that fairness was not guaranteed, and that safety, emotional or physical, could not always be assumed. Yet instead of surrendering to fear or bitterness, she grew observant. She learned to read rooms, to listen closely, and to rely on her instincts. The world, she realized, often rewarded silence and punished vulnerability, especially for those who stood outside familiar categories. That awareness didn't harden her, but it did sharpen her sense of self. Even as a young girl, Pam began building an inner strength that did not depend on approval. These early encounters with exclusion planted something important within her, the understanding that dignity sometimes had to be self-defined. Rather than shrinking to fit expectations, she slowly learned how to stand her ground. Those formative years didn't just teach her about the limits of acceptance, they taught her how resilience is formed quietly, long before anyone notices. The woman she would later become was already taking shape, guided by the knowledge that survival required awareness, adaptability, and a refusal to disappear. Strength as self-protection. As Pam grew older, she made a conscious decision not to let fear define her sense of self. Instead of remaining guarded or withdrawn, she chose to cultivate strength in ways that felt empowering rather than reactive. Training in self-defense and martial arts became less about confrontation and more about reclaiming trust in her own body. Discipline gave her structure, and movement gave her confidence. Each practice session reinforced the idea that strength could be learned, developed, and carried with intention. What began as a practical response to vulnerability gradually transformed into a deeper sense of control and self-assurance. Through this training, Pam learned how presence alone could shift power. She discovered that strength did not require aggression. It required awareness, balance, and calm. That understanding followed her into adulthood and eventually onto film sets, where audiences would later marvel at her physical confidence. Many assumed her on-screen toughness was carefully choreographed, but in reality, it came from years of real preparation and lived experience. She knew how to fall, how to rise, and how to hold her ground. This authenticity gave her performances a rare credibility that couldn't be taught. Pam wasn't acting out strength, she was expressing something she had already earned. Just as importantly, this self-protection extended beyond the physical. She learned to set boundaries, to recognize when situations didn't align with her values, and to walk away when necessary. Strength, for Pam, became the ability to say no without apology. It shaped the roles she accepted and the lines she refused to cross. Over time, this inner confidence became inseparable from her identity. It wasn't loud or boastful, it was steady. And that steadiness allowed her to move through a demanding world without losing herself in it. Chasing opportunity, not fame. Pam's path into entertainment was not fueled by dreams of stardom or public admiration. As a college student in Denver, her decision to enter a beauty pageant was practical, rooted in the need to support her education rather than pursue recognition. She didn't win, but she left an impression at a time when simply being seen carried significance. That single opportunity led to a connection that pointed her toward Hollywood, though she stepped through that door with uncertainty rather than confidence. When she eventually moved to Los Angeles, she arrived without comfort or guarantees. The city did not offer shortcuts. Instead, it tested her resilience daily. Pam worked wherever she could, often juggling multiple jobs just to cover basic needs. Life was exhausting, unpredictable, and humbling. There were moments when the weight of survival felt heavier than ambition, but she refused to let discouragement make decisions for her. Each job, no matter how small or temporary, became a lesson. She learned how the industry operated from the inside, how conversations unfolded, how power shifted, and how persistence mattered more than polish. Pam wasn't waiting to be discovered. She was actively preparing herself. She studied people, absorbed information, and stayed alert to possibility. Fame was never the goal. What she wanted was opportunity, the chance to work, to grow, and to define herself beyond limitations others tried to impose. Every struggle added depth to her understanding of success. She learned that progress was rarely immediate and that survival itself could be an achievement. By choosing perseverance over visibility, Pam built a foundation that would later support a career defined not by luck, but by endurance, preparation, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. Learning Hollywood from the inside Los Angeles did not welcome Pam Grier with open arms. Instead, it tested her persistence at every turn. She worked behind the scenes, answering phones at casting offices, learning how the industry functioned by observing it up close. She watched how decisions were made, how power operated, and how easily people could be reduced to types rather than talents. These early years were difficult, marked by uncertainty and survival, but they also gave Pam insight. She learned how to navigate spaces that weren't built for her, how to speak up without losing herself, and when to walk away. While others saw rejection, Pam saw preparation. Each day spent learning the system strengthened her resolve to eventually challenge it. The roles she would later play weren't accidents. They were the result of years spent understanding how the industry worked and how she could bend it, even slightly, in her favor. Breaking through with Force Pam's breakthrough came when she was cast in low-budget action films that few initially took seriously. Yet she approached each role with discipline and intention, training relentlessly and performing her own stunts whenever possible. When audiences saw her on screen, they were struck by her physical authority and confidence. She wasn't framed as helpless or ornamental. She was active, commanding, and unafraid. These performances resonated deeply, especially with viewers who had never seen a woman like her portrayed this way before. Though the films were controversial and often misunderstood, Pam understood their impact. She recognized that visibility mattered, even when the platform was imperfect. Her performances challenged expectations and quietly rewrote what women could be in action cinema. She wasn't just breaking through, she was pushing the boundaries outward, forcing the industry to reckon with her presence. Choosing power over compliance. As her career gained momentum, Pam encountered pressure that tested her values. Hollywood was not shy about its expectations, especially toward women. Pam made it clear early on that her dignity was not negotiable. She refused situations that compromised her sense of self, even when doing so meant risking her career. Those choices were not easy, and they often came with consequences, but Pam stood firm. Every refusal was an act of self-respect. She understood that success built on silence or submission was not success at all. This mindset shaped her legacy as much as her performances did. She chose power over compliance, self-worth over convenience, and in doing so, she set an example that extended far beyond film sets. Becoming a cultural force. By the mid-1970s, Pam Grier had become more than a movie star. She was a cultural force. Her characters were bold, unapologetic, and unwilling to be dismissed. They reflected anger, justice, and autonomy in ways audiences hadn't seen before. These films, though often labeled narrowly, carried deeper meaning for many viewers. Pam represented a kind of freedom that felt revolutionary. She didn't wait to be rescued, and she didn't shrink herself to fit expectations. The impact of these roles echoed across generations, influencing filmmakers and performers who would later credit her as a trailblazer. Pam understood the weight of that responsibility, even as the industry struggled to fully support her evolution beyond a single genre. When the industry shifted. As trends changed, opportunities narrowed. The same industry that once benefited from Pam's groundbreaking presence struggled to imagine her in new ways. Roles became less frequent, often smaller, sometimes limiting. Rather than disappear, Pam adapted. She explored television, theater, and teaching, expanding her creative reach. These years tested her patience but also deepened her craft. She wasn't chasing relevance, she was building longevity. Each project, regardless of scale, was approached with professionalism and care. Pam refused to let her past define her ceiling. She continued learning, mentoring, and contributing, even when recognition lagged behind effort. A health battle no one saw. At a time when her career seemed steady, Pam faced a personal health crisis that changed everything. What began as a routine medical visit became a moment of reckoning. The diagnosis forced her to confront mortality in a way she never had before. Rather than retreat, Pam continued working quietly while undergoing treatment, determined not to let fear define her final chapters. Drawing on discipline, faith, and inner resolve, she navigated one of the most difficult periods of her life with remarkable composure. The experience stripped away illusions and clarified priorities. Survival became an act of defiance, and healing became a journey that reshaped her understanding of strength. Healing beyond the physical recovery required more than medical intervention. Pam explored holistic approaches, combining physical care with emotional and spiritual grounding. She believed healing was multifaceted, involving the mind as much as the body. Over time, her resilience paid off. The experience left her with a renewed sense of purpose and gratitude. She became an advocate for awareness, encouraging others to listen to their bodies and seek care early. Her survival was not just personal, it became a message of hope for others facing similar battles. Pam didn't frame herself as invincible. She framed herself as committed to living. Revisiting the past to understand the present later in life, Pam made the courageous decision to revisit parts of her past she had long kept private. Through reflection and therapy, she began to understand how early experiences had shaped her choices, her relationships, and her on-screen persona. The strength audiences admired was not an act, it was armor. Writing her memoir allowed her to reclaim her narrative fully, on her own terms. Sharing her truth was not about reopening wounds, but about releasing their hold. It was an act of self-definition, one that resonated deeply with readers and reintroduced Pam as not just an icon, but a human being. A comeback. Written in respect, Pam's return to the spotlight came when filmmakers who truly understood her legacy chose to honor it. When Quentin Tarantino cast her in Jackie Brown, it was not nostalgia, it was recognition. The role allowed Pam to embody maturity, intelligence, and quiet authority. Audiences and critics alike responded, celebrating her performance as layered and powerful. The film reaffirmed what many already knew. Pam Grier had never lost her ability. She had simply been waiting for the right opportunity. That comeback wasn't about reclaiming fame, it was about being seen fully. Reinvention. Without apology. In the years that followed, Pam continued working across film and television, choosing roles that reflected depth and authenticity. She embraced complexity, humor, and vulnerability, proving that evolution didn't require erasing the past. Whether in drama, comedy, or voice work, she brought presence and purpose to every project. Age did not limit her, it refined her. Pam showed that longevity in entertainment was possible without compromise, and that reinvention could be both graceful and bold. A legacy that cannot be diminished. Pam Grier's legacy is not confined to box office numbers or genre labels. It lives in the doors she helped open, the stories she changed, and the people she inspired. She redefined what strength looked like, on screen and off, refusing to be reduced or forgotten. Her journey is one of endurance, courage, and self-respect. Pam Grier didn't just survive Hollywood, she reshaped it, leaving behind a legacy rooted in truth, resilience, and unapologetic presence.